us have is we are presiding over a crumbling infrastructure, and we're trying to run a 21st century economy on a 20th century infrastructure, and it's one of the reasons that we're struggling. And we have to find ways. The motor fuels tax, there appears to be very little tolerance, if any, to increase that. It was put in place in 1993, has not been increased since. And vehicle miles traveled is one of the mechanisms that has been suggested. I think we should look at it. But again, I want to say I'm not endorsing it. I haven't studied it thoroughly enough to have an opinion on it.
This tweet has come in for you. Representative Bishop, what do you feel is the downside to releasing or threatening to release part of the strategic oil reserve?
Frankly, I don't think there is a downside. In the recent past, we have had 3 releases from the reserve. In each of those cases, the price of oil has dropped significantly. In fact, when President George H.W. Bush released oil from the reserve after the first Iraq War, the price of oil went down by 33%. When President George Bush released oil in the wake of Katrina, the price of oil went down by, I think, 5 or 6%. So I think the reserve is filled to capacity, over 700 million barrels. The legislation that I filed yesterday would authorize the president to release up to 5% of that. And it would also authorize the president to release from the reserve oil to deal with market manipulation, and price driven by excessive speculation, which frankly is what we're dealing with right now.
John Boehner said yesterday that everything is on the table as far as budget cuts go. Everything is on the table except tax cuts. I mean, instead of tax increases.
Yeah, I frankly think that is an unhelpful position for the Speaker to take. Our revenue as a percentage of GDP is at the lowest point since about World War II, 14.5% of GDP. Normally it's around 18 or 19% of GDP. And if you look at the drivers of our deficit and the drivers of our swing in the Clinton years from projecting surpluses to the very real deficits that we're contending with now, the biggest driver is the collapse of tax revenue, partly from tax cuts, partly from the difficulties that the economy is experiencing. So I think that we cannot just absolutely rule out tax increases. We have to be very careful. We have to recognize that we have a very fragile recovery. We don't want to choke that off. But at the same time, we have to put in place, it seems to me, a tax structure that's fair and that provides us with the revenue that we need to support the programs that most people in this country want to see us continue to have.
Marion in Zanesville, Ohio, thanks for holding. You're on with Congressman Tim Bishop, a Democrat of New York.
Good morning, gentlemen, and thanks for taking my call. I was just looking back at the mergers and acquisitions in the oil patch in 1998 through 2001, and it seems to me that the big oil companies, or as you'd call them, the Big Five, pretty much put Standard Oil back together again. And you couple that with the repeal of Glass-Steagall and the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, and it just seems like it's a party out of control. I was just wondering, shouldn't we do something about all the financial speculation in the oil market? Wouldn't a good place to start, since there's 15 million federal employees out there? How about if the government pension funds just took their money out of the oil patch? And wouldn't that do more to knock down the price of oil in a hurry than anything I could possibly think of?
Well, I do think that we have to deal very aggressively with the issue of speculation. Speculators have increased their positions in the oil market by about 68% over the last 2 years, and Goldman Sachs has let its investors know that they believe that the price of a barrel of oil is about $20 to $26 higher as a result of the speculation that's going on. The Dodd-Frank reform bill empowers the Commodities Future Trading Commission to crack down on excessive speculation. And I'm organizing a letter among my colleagues to go to the chairman of the CFTC to urge him to use that authority to intervene in the case of excessive speculation. And again, as I say, yesterday the price of oil went down by almost $10 a barrel without any external factors at play that would have driven such a decline. This is about speculation, and we really need to get it under some form of control.
Ernest in Miami, you are on the air. Go ahead, Ernest.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I'm so concerned. I love this country. I'm African American, and I don't support Barack Obama, number one. But first thing I want to say is that there's three entities that is really killing and destroying our country. Number one is the EPA. Number two is the President administration and the Democratic Party. You know, it's all about policies and taxing. You know, I even went back and did some research in the 1700s and 1800s when they called the Republicans radicals. And I also understood that in the beginning the Republican Party was started to stop slavery, to help the African Americans. And I'm so concerned that when the Democratic Party was fighting against slavery, there are so many African Americans who are Democrats, and that make me wonder. I'm very concerned, and I just hope that the Democratic Party, you know, would stop playing God, you know, and respect and acknowledge the true God.
Congressman Bishop.
Not quite sure where to start, but let me just take this one point. Ernest, you know, sort of fingered three villains in terms of the future of this country. Let me just talk about the Democratic Party. We have had 4 balanced budgets in this country since World War II, and all 4 of those were balanced under a Democratic administration, the administration of President Clinton. We created 22 million jobs in the Clinton administration, and the Clinton administration handed over a 10-year surplus of $5.5 trillion, estimated surplus. All of that in the next 8 years very quickly went away. The next 8 years produced the worst job creation record of any president since Herbert Hoover, and resulted in the trillion-dollar deficits that we're looking at now. I mean, we should remember that the Congressional Budget Office estimated the deficit for fiscal 9 when President Obama took office. On the day he took office, they estimated that deficit at $1.3 trillion. So this administration inherited an economy in free fall, inherited 2 wars, and inherited a great many other problems, and I think methodically has been working its way through those problems, despite really monolithic opposition from the Republican Party. We have a long, long way to go, and we're not going to get to where we need to be by pointing fingers. We need to come together and try to solve the problems that the American people sent us here to solve, and hopefully the kind of process that's going on right now, led by Vice President Biden, to bring some closure to the issue of raising the debt limit and what policies we have to put in place that all of us can be comfortable with. That's the kind of process that we need to move this country forward.
Last call for our guest, Tim Bishop, comes from Holyoke, Massachusetts. Democrat, John.
Hi, Mr. Bishop. Apparently common sense ain't common anymore. I think ever since the Bush administration has come in, you let all the, oversight leave Wall Street. It seems like it's a war between Wall Street and our government. I mean, these are multinational corporations. If they have no alliance to this country and its people, and it's all about money, there's supposed to be regulation there. There's supposed to be EPA and FDA and everything else. I mean, we deserve, if they call it Obamacare, we do deserve it because, I mean, all these oil companies are poisoning the oceans. They're fracking on land to get gas. There's tritium in the water. There's mercury in the water. They're poisoning us, taking our taxpayer money to make bonuses. And it seems like the market's rigged because the minute Obama does something, the market goes down. I mean, it seems like there's a consolidation of power. Wolfowitz is head of the World Bank. Where's our money? You can find the enemy's money, but where's our money that went to all these banks all over the world?
I think the whole issue of regulation is one where balance is what's required. There's no question that the absence of regulation contributed significantly to the financial collapse that we experienced in the summer and fall of 2008. There is no question that if we were allowed the EPA to walk off the field, that we would be contending with very significant environmental disruptions all over this country in terms of maintaining clean air and clean water. The challenge is to finding the right balance environmentally, finding the right balance in terms of regulating Wall Street, in terms of regulating corporations. And I think throughout our history, we have sometimes fallen off that balance on either side. And I think it's important that we all move in the direction of seeing to it that we have appropriate regulations so that we don't fall victim to the kinds of crises that we fell victim to, particularly in the financial markets 2 years ago.
Congressman Tim Bishop, a Democrat of New York, has been our guest for the last 45 minutes. Thank you. I hope you can come back sometime.
I hope I can too. Thank you.
We've got about 45 minutes left in the Washington Journal this morning, and up next, Andrew Breitbart discussing his new book, Righteous Indignation. We'll be right back.